The plot thickens, and President Trump's drive to end the Russia-Ukraine war, to bring the warring sides together, to talk with Russia, to talk with Ukraine, and find an amenable solution. Things have been getting a little bit chaotic, and now they're starting to get a little bit contradictory. Now, of course, we've been keeping you up to this whole situation as it has evolved, everywhere from Trump getting upset, calling Zelensky a dictator. Then it appeared for a while anyway that the good cop was going to come back out. And Keith Kellogg yesterday went to visit with Zelensky in Kyiv. And you see this picture there that was taken yesterday as they had a meeting. And then there was supposed to have been a press conference after that. Well, that press conference was abruptly canceled, and it was being reported that it was canceled because of growing tensions between the U.S. and the Ukraine side. No more evidence was ever provided after that. No one made any other statements. But then this morning, you had Keith Kellogg post a tweet about 6 hours ago, actually, where he actually, if you can throw that up there, Gary, where, he said, a long and intense day with the senior leadership of Ukraine, extensive and positive discussions with Zelensky, the embattled and courageous leader of a nation at war with his talented national security team. So just praising him up one side and down the other. Well, that was one voice from the U.S. administration today, but there were some others that were somewhat less pleasant, shall we say. Marco Rubio, first of all, this was a video that was released this morning, but I think it was actually made last night. But he's talking about maybe the U.S. is getting played and they're not liking it.
I was personally very upset because we had a conversation with President Zelensky, the vice president and I, the three of us. And we discussed this issue about the mineral rights. And we explained to them, look, we want to be in a joint venture with you, not because we're trying to steal from your country, but because we think that's actually a security guarantee. If we're your partner in an important economic endeavor, we get to get paid back some of the money the taxpayers have given, close to $200 billion. And it also, now we have a vested interest in the security of Ukraine. And he said, sure, we want to do this deal. It makes all the sense in the world. The only thing is I need to run it through my legislative process. They have to approve it. I read 2 days later that Zelensky's out there saying, I rejected the deal. I told him, no way, that we're not doing that. Well, that's not what happened in that meeting. And not someone who's out there putting this sort of counter messaging to try to, hustle us in that regard. That's not going to be productive here.
Man, for a diplomat, that's pretty harsh language. They're trying to hustle us. And just kind of, let your minds play out on that for a minute and just kind of resonate there. If you have the Secretary of State of the United States accusing the leader of Ukraine of trying to hustle us, what does that tell you? Because it's obviously he's holding his tongue. You can tell that Rubio would like to say stronger language, but hustle us is the tamest he can come up with. But that tells you that Zelensky is trying to play hardball. And we talked about some of that he does have a lot of chutzpah in some of the things that he says. And maybe it's not so wise to actually do that with the only player that has the ability to give you security guarantees. You've had the Europeans. Keir Starmer, we showed on this channel just days ago, said, yeah, we're willing to give troops, but only the United States can provide security guarantees, even for us. So if that's the hand that's feeding you, doesn't seem like you want to give them any reason to think that you're hustling them. But this whole issue with the rare earths is providing some of the considerations for that, because let's talk about it a little bit about what we're talking about here. Now, some have accused the Trump administration of trying to exploit his country. You heard Rubio in there saying, we're not trying to steal your stuff. You could come up with your own interpretation of what all that means, and is this an exploitation or is it not? But it's not completely unreasonable for the Trump administration to be talking about this. You've heard President Trump a few times talk about it. He says that the European money, a majority of which is in the form of loans. It's not just grants or just free money or just free stuff, but it's in the form of loans. So at least theoretically, the European Union can get their money back in time if the economy ever recovers or whatever. It's quite debatable whether that would actually happen, but it's at least on paper, it's a possibility that they could get their money back. There are almost no such guarantees. Apparently, the U.S. is, I think, maybe given a small amount in loans, might not have even done that because the vast majority was just given to them. And now Trump is saying, hey, we want an opportunity to have a return on our investment as well. And so you had Zelensky himself said many times, hey, this is a really good deal. You heard Rubio there talk about, yes, this is something that I want to do. I'm going to show you in just a second where it wasn't someone's hearsay, someone's word. Zelensky himself was quite emphatic about it. But first of all, I want to show you that's what Rubio said this morning. Well, here's what, in a video released today, here's what Trump said on a radio interview this morning.
His cities get demolished as his people get killed, as his soldiers get decimated, where you have old men and young men. You have men that are too old to fight, right, men that are too young to fight. And I've been watching him negotiate with no cards. He has no cards. And you get sick of it. You just get sick of it. And I've had it. And he then made a deal with us for rare earth and things. And who knows what rare earth is worth, but at least it's something. And who knows what it's worth. Secretary of Treasury, a very good guy, actually went there, and they couldn't even come close to getting a deal done. Frankly, I wish he didn't go there, waste all of his time like that. But they couldn't get close. They met, and then when he wanted to get it closed, he was unable to meet him again. But so just a wasted trip, a dangerous trip, too. I didn't like it that he was doing it.
So you see that Rubio talked about there that in the Munich Security Conference, he and the vice president had talked to Zelensky, had come to a verbal agreement on it. So shortly after that, President Trump sent the Secretary of Commerce, Bissett, to seal the deal and brought with him a document that Zelensky was supposed to sign. Zelensky didn't sign it, and he sent Vincent home empty-handed. That, to Trump's words, I'm sick of it, he said. He also points out Zelensky is trying to negotiate with us, trying to play hardball with the U.S. with no cards. And that's really one thing that it doesn't appear that Zelensky really understands who he's dealing with now. I mean, I don't know how he couldn't, but I don't know. Perhaps he just got into this mental framework of dealing with the previous president who did get angry a few times, but for the most part allowed Zelensky to say whatever he wanted to do and do large measure what he wanted to do. It was always delayed, but he ended up getting what he wanted. And maybe that was part of what Zelensky is thinking now. Used to, he told President Biden, I want this weapon systems. He said, no, didn't get it. He said, I want this weapon system, blah, blah, blah. Kept saying it. Then finally he would get it. All right, now I want this weapon system. I want long range missiles. I want ATACMS. I want F-16s, et cetera. And every time he's told no. And then finally he ends up getting it, et cetera. Maybe he's thinking that that's just how the American system works. And so he wants to keep going with it. So he agrees to this rare earths deal, but then when the numbers come in and whatever the deal was, and we still don't know for sure what that was, he didn't like it, so he thinks he's going to play hardball to say no, so that he thinks he's going to get it later. Maybe that would have worked with President Biden. Could well have. But this isn't President Biden, and he should be crystal clear on that at this point. And to have President Trump, after he's already called Zelensky a dictator without an election, then you have to say, maybe I should try a different track. But so far, Zelensky hasn't been willing to do that. And in fact, let's look. So I told you a second ago that Zelensky himself had said this. You saw the Rubio talk about that before. Here is Zelensky earlier this month, I think it was on February the 8th, where he publicly claimed, yeah, I'm looking for a deal.
These deposits are priceless. It is huge amounts of money. Huge. That is why we need to protect it. So if we are talking about a deal, that's what the Americans want, then let's do a deal. We are only for it. Let's do the deal.
Let's do the deal, he keeps saying. Let's do the deal. He said it many times, and it was in public. It was on some of his other videos. It was on a lot of the articles that were coming out. And so at that point, you're thinking, okay, he has paid attention. He's read Trump's Art of the Deal, or somebody on his staff probably has, because he's trying to talk Trump's language, and he succeeded. He was talking Trump's language, so Trump said, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do a deal. And then now he's trying to play hardball and trying to negotiate and change the terms of the deal. But you see that after Secretary Bissett was sent, as you heard Trump say a second ago, all of a sudden Zelensky just says, yeah, reject it. Throw it out the window. I think he was trying to probably play hardball and say, Yeah, we're not going to give. I think 50% of the rare earths is what reportedly was on the request list. And maybe he says, now we're not going to do 50%. We'll do something else. Who knows what number he may have thrown out there. But whatever it was, he didn't like it. So now he's trying to play hardball, thinking, okay, Trump likes the negotiation. Well, let me show him some negotiation. Here's the thing. If you're going to play, if you actually read the art of the deal, you'll see that Trump talks a lot about leverage and about negotiating a hard deal. And if you've ever read anything about Trump's time in business before he ran for the presidency, you'll see he always drives a hard bargain. And so to think that you're going to out-Trump Trump and say, I'm going to hold out for a hard bargain when you don't have the leverage, you don't have the cards, as President Trump pointed out there. So it doesn't seem like it would have been a really wise thing to try and go back on what you've agreed to after Trump sends his primary economic emissary over there to seal the deal, and you send him back empty-handed. That is an insult directly to Trump personally, which obviously he didn't take very well. And you heard him say, you know, I'm sick of it. I've had it with Zelensky. Trump is not one that forgives easily, never forgets anything here. So I dare say that if he thinks that he's going to get a better deal than the 50% that was offered, he's probably mistaken. And if he was mistaken, if he was unclear on that, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz tried to remedy it.
How are we going to get Zelensky, President Zelensky, to cooperate?
Yeah. Well, so first, and this is the part that the media just wants to ignore, it was Zelensky last September, as part of his victory plan, it was Zelensky that proposed, hey, let's go into a partnership together.
Right.
If the United States will invest in us, we have aluminum, we have gallium, we have tritium, we have all of these rare earth minerals that the modern economy needs. A lot of them are not fully developed. They need investment. President Trump's a deal maker. And so now President Trump proposes the deal,
right,
and sent our Treasury Secretary all the way out to Kyiv to propose it, and then we get this rhetoric in the media. Well, look, here's the bottom line. President Zelensky is going to sign that deal. And you will see that in the very short term.
Well, maybe that message is getting through, because in the very short term, there's now news out right now that maybe Zelensky is reconsidering. U.S. and Ukraine discuss, quote, improved minerals deal after Trump rages at Zelensky. So, I mean, look at that picture even right there. Just look at the body language of Zelensky back there. It's just, it looks like message received from someone who has no cards and has explained that they have no cards. And you can just imagine the things that may have been going on behind the scenes of, dude, you realize we can just walk. We can say, hey, you've been intransigent. You don't want to do this. Okay, that's your war. You want to fight it? Cool. You want to talk to the European Union to get them to provide everything that you need and put your security and your physical life in their hands? Have at it. I'm not saying that is what happened. I don't have any insight whatsoever into what was happening, but based on the body language there and what happened afterwards, that's certainly a possible thing that may have been said. And Zelensky really does need to adhere to this. And, you know, it's not like we're talking about, all right, there's $5 trillion in the bank of Ukraine, in the vaults, in the buried deep underneath Kyiv or something like that. These are theoretical riches. And there's a reason why they haven't been widespread mined and exploited prior to this, not because Ukraine didn't want the money. They always have. Ukraine is it was prior to the war, was designated and quantified as the most corrupt state in the entire European continent. There's a reason for that. But that also tells you that they have no shy of wanting cash if they can get it. And if these rare earth minerals were easy to get, they would already have done it. And the fact that they haven't shows you that it's really difficult and very expensive. Mike Waltz talked a little bit there about how difficult that it would be. You heard Trump in that radio interview a second ago. He said, I'm not really sure how much is there. A lot of investment would need to be done. I mean, we're talking once the war is completely over and security has been reestablished, you're probably talking 5, 6, 7 years, I would wager, before anybody's going to get any kind of return on investment. Because a lot of these things have to be mined, first of all, out of the ground. Some of them are actually miles under the ground. So it's going to be extraordinarily difficult just to extract them. Then you have to have processing plants. And apparently it's large amounts of raw material to get small amounts of these very expensive and very necessary rare earth minerals and whatever, all the things that he was mentioning there. So this is a multi-year project, which will probably never in Trump's lifetime while he's in office, he probably won't ever see a penny of this. The United States won't see a penny of it, even if the deal is struck here. So this is no money that's going to cost Zelensky anything. It's just access to what may come later. Without the United States, without this investment in the infrastructure necessary to mine and then reprocess it, Ukraine's not going to have a penny. So they have a lot to gain from this, and it's reasonable that they should work hard and get a good deal that's good for their country, that they should get some meaningful percentage out of this. They should. And I hope that they do. That they shouldn't just say, yeah, whatever you want, here's the deed to the land. That's not good for Ukraine. That's just not exploiting is a kind of an ugly deal. I don't think we should do that. But I do think that if we're going to provide the time, the labor, the expertise to get the stuff out of the ground, then it's reasonable that we get a reasonable percentage of that. And so should Ukraine. And if you want to get that, because consider, if you don't make the deal right here, war aside, then you're going to get 100% of nothing, which is what you had prior to this. You've had access to this your entire time in office, and virtually nothing's been produced. So you're not going to lose anything, but you stand to gain quite a bit if, or at least your country does, if this deal is done and they're able to work it, over the time that's going to be necessary. But you first have to come to a deal on that. And listen, he's not doing himself any good, even in future income for his country. If he's trying to play hardball with Trump right now, the one who literally has his life in his hand, because Trump is interested in more than just Ukraine. And that's where I want to talk about the next part of this here. There's really not a lot of confusion on this point, and that is that America and Russia are both looking beyond this war. They want to get it off the table for various reasons. Obviously, it's an ongoing conflict that costs both sides tremendously, human capital as well as the destruction of the Ukrainian land, etc. So they want to get the war off the table. It's a big deal, but it's not the only deal, and it might not even be the biggest deal, because we've shown you in some of the recent clips after the Riyadh meetings between the United States and Russia, to where both sides come out and they're talking about how they want to see improved relations. They want to get to a security architecture for all of Europe. They want to talk about economic deals, things to move things back on a diplomatic front, so where they have normal engagement so that issues can be worked through, and that some relative calm can be brought back into the situation. And also there's nuclear reduction treaties are on Trump's mind. I'm a firm advocate of that. I think it's a great idea. But Rubio was asking that same interview on this topic here about when will there be a Trump-Putin meeting?
What's the timeline for a meeting between President Trump and President Putin?
There isn't going to be a meeting until we know what the meeting's going to be about. I mean,
do you expect it later in 2025?
I don't know the timing of it, but a meeting between President Putin and President Trump has to a meeting about something. We have to know what that meeting is about, what's going to be achieved at it. You don't generally have these meetings until you know some outcome or some progress has been made. So I think when that meeting happens will largely depend on whether we can make any progress on ending the war in Ukraine. And if we can, and that meeting is what seals the deal, I think everybody should celebrate that President Trump is a peacemaker. He's the only global leader right now that can make this happen. The only global leader.
Why do you say he's the only one?
Well, because others have tried and have failed.
Yeah, and who else has tried and failed? I would argue almost nobody outside of Russia has tried to bring a negotiated into this. And in that regard, Rubio is 100% correct. Trump is the only one who's even willing to talk to Russia, other than Robert Fico out of Slovakia or Viktor Orban out of Hungary. They both physically went to Moscow to talk to Russia. Unfortunately, they aren't the power brokers. He's not in Europe. They're members and they have influence, but you saw they were excoriated for doing it. And so those that do have the power in Europe, you're talking about France, UK, Germany, Italy to a certain extent. Where were they? Well, they were about, let's keep pouring on the weapons. Let's keep pouring in the ammo. Let's keep supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. And of course, that was the the song and dance that was sang in Washington with President Biden throughout his entire 3 years that he was basically involved while during this war was going on. So we never would talk to Russia. We never even sought a negotiated settlement, rejected every possibility that there was. Many times there were negotiations. We always either didn't support them or outright sabotaged them so that they wouldn't happen, so that we continue on with the war. So now here comes Trump, and he's talking about, yes, we do want to talk. Obviously, he's now in the process of that. He's putting actions to his words. But Rubio is right there. And I think this illustrates something that the Trump administration has learned from its first term in office, and Trump himself, I think. This harkens back the comment that Rubio made there. Well, there's not going to be a meeting until we have something to reveal, until there's something to discuss. The heads of state don't meet together to discuss and negotiate a deal. They get there to seal a deal. So my guess is that you're not going to see Trump and Putin meet until you're like 95% of the way there, and then they can work those final 5% out and have some kind of an idea. That's something that Trump has painful experience with. You may recall in, I believe it was 2018, maybe in 2019, I can't recall right off the top of my head, when Trump went to Hanoi, Vietnam, to try and get a deal done with Kim Jong-un. At the time, he had been working for many years, started off his administration in 2017 with Rocket Man and Fire and Fury and all that, and a lot of tough rhetoric. Then all of a sudden he decides to break convention, and he goes and physically meets with Kim Jong-un. Virtually nobody had done that in the United States. Nobody would have even thought about it. But Trump says, well, if I don't talk to the guy, how am I ever going to reach a negotiated settlement? And he started to have these meetings. They were moving forward. They were going toward the objective of a denuclearization on the peninsula. I don't know how likely that ever would have happened, but you certainly could have had a freeze involved. You could have had a rollback. Lots of things that would have been possible. Korea wanted it. There were some leverage that Trump had. There were some things that we could offer that would at least minimize the chance of any kind of nuclear use or the continued development even of their program. Well, that came to a head in the Hanoi meetings, and ironically, I was actually there. Was invited by a South Korean group, and had been talking to some of their embassy personnel on the ground there, some of their diplomats, because all expectations were that there was going to be a deal. I'll never forget, I was meeting with one of the delegation of the Korean embassy at the time, on the morning of when there was supposed to be a big meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un in the palace. And they were telling me, we have an outside hope that maybe there'll be a big deal signed here that will, improve inter-Korean relations, that there may be some economic incentives that the United States and North Korea could open up to improve relations and maybe even move toward the area of freezing the nuclear program. They said they hope that, but they really, though, most likely they're only going to get a little deal today, what they called it. But that's fine. That's cool, because then that just moves to the next one. And then maybe in 6 months, we'll have another summit, maybe this time with the South Korean and the North Korean leader all together, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, everyone was shocked. I won't forget this. I was in the media center, and I see up on the screens that all of a sudden you see cars going by, and there's, like breaking news on the banner. And I was looking up at the screen, and you could see everybody stopped what they were doing, and everybody's looking up at this big screen TV. And all of a sudden, Trump's leaving the palace way ahead of what he was supposed to. It was supposed to have been a press conference and then a dinner and some other stuff. And all of a sudden, here's Trump leaving. And everybody's going, wow, what's going on? Well, as it turned out, John Bolton was the national security advisor for Trump at the time and talked Trump into walking away from the deal. So Kim Jong-un had thought the same thing that nearly anyone would. Heads of state don't meet unless they're going to have some kind of an agreement of some sort. So he had, because he's afraid of flying, he had actually taken a train from North Korea through China all the way up to Vietnam, et cetera. And as we found out later, was absolutely livid because he felt like he had been duped. And it turns out that Trump was also, in my view, he was duped by John Bolton, who convinced him to walk away from the deal because he said, ask for, if probably this was in the realm of possibility, something that Trump could have asked Kim Jong-un to do, Bolton had convinced him to ask for something that's way beyond that. There's no way he was going to agree to. And when Kim Jong-un didn't agree to it, then said, okay, that's it, fine, we're going to walk. And then even the little deal that was on the table was lost all of the momentum was just absolutely destroyed, and everything got set back and everything got frozen for a long time. And then it ended up going south. And then when, of course, Biden came in, he took no action on that at all. I think that Trump is going to learn from that situation and say, all right, we're not going to get together at the head of state unless I can come out with a win and can come back and say, here's something that we have. Because he took a lot of heat for what happened in Vietnam. Because Bolton's claiming, no, we'll play hardball with them and then we'll come out with a better deal. And of course, they get no deal. It was actually worse than it was going in, never regained that. And I don't think Trump wants to repeat that. So they're not going to meet until they have something to sign on there. Now, the question is, what's going to be the parameters of what's going to be signed here? Now, I told you that earlier that Trump had said of Zelensky's trying to negotiate and he has no cards, and he had disdain for him like that. Well, the question is, what is Putin going to be wanting here? And what kind of cards does who have? And here was Putin a couple of days ago talking about he had said 100 times he is 100% ready to have negotiations.
As for other participants, first of all, Russia has never refused contact with Europeans. Russia has never rejected the negotiation process with Ukraine, never. It was our so-called partners in those negotiations who refused. The Europeans cut off contact with Russia, while the Ukrainian side prohibited itself from engaging in negotiations and withdrew from the Istanbul negotiation process, openly and publicly announcing it. Well, we are not forcing anything on anyone. We are ready. I've said this 100 times. If they want to negotiate, they're welcome to do so, and we will be ready to return to the negotiating table.
Okay, so he's ready to negotiate, but the question is, what's he going to negotiate? Because he said some things before that, which I think are really instructive, that I hope everybody in the Trump world is paying a lot of attention to, because I think it's really important, and I think it's a signal coming from Moscow, is that he was talking about the history of some of these negotiations, specifically the Istanbul Agreement. He may also have had in mind the December 2021 deal, treaty, which Russia offered, which was summarily rejected. The conversations that we know that he had with NATO, that Stoltenberg talked about with disdain, that were completely rejected. So Putin has said, we've been willing to negotiate from the beginning, literally from before, during, and throughout this war. They've been willing to negotiate, so we still remain to do so. It's been the Europeans who have been unwilling to talk to him, minus Fico and Orban. And Zelensky, who actually passed a law that he won't talk to Russia as long as Vladimir Putin's in power. So those are the things that are going on there. But the fact that he said that we're remembering these deals before means there's going to have to be a good deal on the table, and he's going to have to be convinced that it's going to work, because if he's not, he does have all the cards here. And I like what one of our viewers here said a minute ago. It said Putin actually has a straight flush. And I think that's probably pretty accurate description of what he has here. And he's asking for a lot. The June 14 lines that he mentioned several times from last summer are still the minimum standard that they'll even talk about. And that is all four of the administrative borders of the four oblast, Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. No non-aligned status, no NATO declared inside Russia, declared that the Ukraine will never be in NATO. And then however he defines demilitarization and denazification. And it's uncertain what that's going to mean, but Putin has clearly said they'll talk to Zelensky, they'll even negotiate with him, but they're not going to sign a deal until somebody has emerged as an actual elected leader in Ukraine. They said maybe as far as October of this year. That's some of the early signs here. So those are the things that that Putin says are basically his entry-level points. And the question is going to be, can Trump agree to that? Because it could potentially cost him if he's coming out as seen as just handing over to Putin everything that he wants, which of course he's already being accused of. But here's the thing that gives me a little bit of optimism, is because Trump seems to be very aware of that. Here he was on Air Force One a couple of nights ago, in contrast to talking about how aggravated he was at Zelensky for not negotiating because he doesn't have any cards. Trump said this about himself.
I think the Russians want to see the war end, and I really do. But I think they have the cards a little bit because, you know, they've taken a lot of territory, so they have the cards.
And that's really a pretty amazing admission, because you have Trump on the one hand denigrating this leader who has no cards, who's trying to play hardball with him, and then you have Trump, who obviously loves to win and hates to lose, openly admitting we don't have the cards here. The Russians do. And that's right. In comparative terms, I mean, they have a straight flush. So why would you want to risk a lot when you know that the other guy's got the cards and you don't have them? I mean, I think that quite unlike the situation with Kim Jong-un in North Korea, at that time, the two sides were closer to an even. In fact, I would even argue that the United States had the upper hand in that. If we wanted a deal, we were going to have to give something to get something, but we were still in the superior position. But this time, the roles are not that in terms of the Ukraine war. And so since Trump wants more than just the end of the war, that is one of the few places where he does have some cards and he does have some leverage. Russia is interested in nuclear limitation treaties. Putin has said so himself. They're interested in having normalized relations. They're interested in having security guarantees that everybody can live with, that their security is guaranteed and so is everybody else's. So those are things that Russia wants, where President Trump does have some leverage. So there is room to negotiate on a lot of these issues, but it's not going to be very much on the Ukraine war itself. On that regard, there is almost no leverage. Kyiv has no leverage at all. None, not even a little bit, frankly. All they can do is keep fighting and keep the war going for a longer time, but that comes with the very high price that the longer they fight, the more men they're going to lose, the more territory they're going to lose, the more cities they're going to lose, that they'll never get back. Whereas if President Trump takes the hard path here and it plays hardball with Zelensky, if that's necessary, and lays down the law to European Union leaders, says, listen, if I don't make a hard deal right now, and that means giving Putin all of the June 14 conditions that he's setting for, then you're going to have less than that. We can play softball and we can just ignore reality and we can ignore the straight flush, as was mentioned a minute ago. But then when the pot comes due, folks, Putin's going to win it. And he'll win it either by you folding and saying, all right, that's the deal right now, June 14 line, or you can keep playing. He'll just keep calling you, keep up in the ante, keep up in the calls and the C's and the raises, et cetera. And you're still going to lose. You're going to lose in any way here, but you can either lose now or you can lose at a much higher cost later. Now, the United States isn't going to lose anymore. Our troops aren't involved. Trump's not even talking about giving any more money, but the Ukraine will have a tremendous loss if it continues to do so. We'll see if Zelensky has learned from his mistakes and is ready to have some kind of a negotiated settlement in the near term, or he can say, you know what, I'm gonna cast my lot with the European Union. I'm gonna go with the European members of NATO, with UK, with Keir Starmer, with Emmanuel Macron, with Schultz in Germany. I'm going to put my future in their hands, and we're going to keep on fighting. I don't know towards what. I mean, I've never heard any rational objective that Zelensky wants to keep fighting other than just to continue going on and not give up. And he still continues to say he wants more weapons and ammunition and all this kind of stuff. He's never said for what. Some of the European leaders, and I think Keir Starmer is the leader of this faction, that says so that we can have a position of strength, can have negotiations later. That's a fantasy, folks. It doesn't exist. The Russians are ready to talk right now. They're ready to end the war right now. They're ready to end the killing of the Ukrainian people right now. So you going after some mythical reason, you've got to have some kind of rational. I've said this before. You need to show me a spreadsheet, Keir Starmer, Volodymyr Zelensky, all the people who agree with this path. Show me on a spreadsheet to where, all right, if I get X number of rounds of ammunition, X number of artillery shells, drones, more tanks, whatever the number is, if we get those, then that can chip the balance in, and then we can move Russia back and increase the pain so that then, rationally speaking, that once this figure is reached here, then the Russians will want a negotiated settlement that's, I don't know, something less than the June 14th line. I don't know what's less, but see, that's what's not happening. They're not doing the hard work. They're not saying, all right, here's our objectives and here's the fundamentals that would be necessary to achieve it. And if we can do this, then we can get this outcome. None of those things have been articulated. Only this bumper sticker of a better position to have a negotiated settlement. You don't know what the better position is. You don't know how or even if it's possible. And you don't even know what the outcome that you're seeking looks like. You can't articulate it to anyone. And I'll tell you what you're doing with that. You may look good on TV for the day. You may come off sounding strong, but all you're doing every day this war goes on, thousands more Ukrainian men will die an unnecessary death. And Ukraine will still lose no matter what. There is nothing that can alter that now. The only question that remains is how many more Ukrainians have to die before we finally sober up, recognize that this is our path here and that there's leverage because Russia wants to get the war over and they want to improve relations with the United States and the West. Those are things that can be used to get the best deal possible. And I've said it before and needs repeating one last time here. It's ugly. It's the terms that you could have gotten in December 2021 were not that bad, slightly worse than it would have been for the Minsk agreements, but still not that bad. Required giving up no territory. The Istanbul agreements were bad because they now no longer included Luhansk and Donetsk, but still relatively good. June 14-9 is now not 2 oblasts, but 4. And if you don't do this one, folks, who knows? 5, 6, 7, 8 oblasts, which John Mearsheimer has said on our show in the past. He thought it could end up being 8. Well, unfortunately, if we don't do the deal now, he's almost certainly going to be proven right. Let's don't prove him right on this one. Okay, let's let it end at the 4. And I hope that the President Trump sticks to his guns because he's probably the one guy that can actually make this happen because he appears to be willing to take the heat that will come from him agreeing with that with the Russians. And he'll take so much heat for it now. People will say appeasement and all this other kind of stuff. You can be guaranteed of that. But history will be good and show well. And the great thing is that people can say whatever they want about Trump all day long, but hundreds of thousands of Ukraine will still be alive to hear the complaints. That's the part that I'm out for and why I hope that he continues on so that the dying can truly stop. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you very much for joining with us. We always value. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't done it, and we will see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.